All right, welcome. Um, what I thought we would do today is talk about the exam. The exam is 30 multiple choice questions, similar to the questions in the module quizzes, but hopefully better than those, since I wrote all these exam questions. It should take you no more than an hour, but I've actually given you more time than that, so time should not be an issue for you. Okay. You can take it anytime beginning midnight tonight through midnight tomorrow. And once you start, your clock will be running. Again, I don't think time will be an issue. So, find a convenient time and take the exam, and then we'll go from there. All right, the exam will cover everything on the course outline since the beginning of class. So let's take a look at that. Share my screen here. This one, share. All right, can you see it? Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I'm just trying to, here, we'll do this. There we go. Open it up a bit. All right, so we've got 4 topics. The introductory stuff, which was the first week, supply and demand, which was the second week, elasticity, which was the third week, and theory of consumer behavior, okay? So what I did is I went through each of those topics and I tried to identify the most important stuff. There are 3 kinds of problems, 3 kinds of questions on the exam. Some are just sort of definitions. You need to identify that you know what the term means. The second are sort of applications of those terms, so that you need to show that not only do you know what the term means, but you know how to use it. And then the third is there are a couple of problems on the exam that sort of scenarios that I set up. There is a supply and demand scenario that's similar to what you did on homework on assignment 4. So I give you a scenario, something happens, something else happens, and then you put them together at the very end. Okay, so if you did assignment, if you figured out assignment 4, you'll be fine on this assignment. And then the other kind of problem is there's a consumer equilibrium problem where I give you utility numbers and a budget and prices, and you have to figure out how to maximize your utility. And we'll talk about that a bit later today. Okay. So in terms of emphasis, there's probably, while it's more or less evenly divided across those 4 subjects, there's less on elasticity. I don't ask you to do much in the way of calculations. They're really sort of conceptual questions so that you understand what elasticity really is. Okay, then, what's elasticity mean? That was an actual question. Think of this as a pre-quiz, pre-exam. Andrew, what's elasticity mean?
Elasticity. I'm not sure. I haven't, to be honest, I'm still finishing up the end of module 4, so I haven't gotten to 5 or 6 yet.
Okay. All right.
I have an answer.
Good. Go.
Elasticity, I think it's so we learned about inelasticity, right? And elasticity, and it's how much people are willing to spend when products change, when like, I don't know how to word it, but it's like when like for instance, like gas prices, if they went up people are willing to spend on that because they it's an elastic thing, because it's not an elastic thing because people need gas prices. But if it's like something like rare, like organic food, then people would not be willing to spend if the prices went up and stuff like that.
Okay. Elasticity, sort of in general terms, means how responsive is demand or how responsive is supply to something that changes. Okay. So if we're looking at something like the price elasticity of demand, the question is, how much does demand change when you change the price? Or if it's an income elasticity, how much does demand change if we change your income, right? So it's always a ratio to the percent change in quantity divided by the percent change in whatever it is that caused the change. Okay. I'm not going to ask you any questions about calculating the arc elasticity because that's something that you can look up. I'm much more interested in you understanding that elasticity is a property, and demand or supply can be more elastic or less elastic. When we say demand is elastic, what that means is that the change in quantity is greater in percent terms than the change in price. So what it means is, say, a small change in price causes a big change in the quantity demanded. So that's elastic. Okay? Inelastic is sort of the opposite. It means a large change in the price only causes a small change in quantity demanded, right? So in this case, demand is not very responsive. It's inelastic. Okay, does that make sense to you? All right, good, good. So what's consumer equilibrium mean? That's the most recent topic. What's consumer equilibrium mean? It's something very practical. Lindsay, do you have an answer?
So I don't think I kind of got that it was what the consumer, everything the consumer wanted while still being able to afford it kind of deal. Yeah.
Consumer equilibrium is the answer to the question, what's the best way to spend your budget? Okay, so when we talk about consumer equilibrium, we literally mean what combination of stuff do you end up with at the store, given that you have only a limited amount of dollars to spend. So it's practical. Okay, the way we say people go about answering those questions is we assume that consumers want to maximize their utility, okay? Utility, let me just see if I can pull that back for a second. I can stop sharing. Utility, hey, William.
Hello.
Good timing on your homework.
Thank you.
We assume that consumers want to get the most utility or satisfaction they can out of their limited budget, okay? So when you buy stuff, it's your dollars which are limited. If you want to get the most total utility out of your dollars, then for every dollar that you spend, you want to spend it on the item that will bring you the most marginal utility per dollar of expenditure. Okay, and that's really what getting the biggest bang for the buck means. It means for every dollar that you spend it where it will bring in the most utility for you. Okay, so the way you work these problems, these utility problems, is you start off with, say, total utility. So you have a table. You have at least two goods, and you have information about how much utility you get from consuming 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many units of that good. Okay, and then you have a similar table for the other product. You need to be given what your budget is, how much income you have to spend, and you need to know what the prices of the two goods are. Okay, so the very first step always is you need to figure out marginal utility. Okay. How do we figure out marginal utility? What is marginal utility and how does it differ from total utility? William?
Isn't it something along the lines of like when you get a utility, you can gain like compensation from it that you can take and add on to a next utility that you want to use?
What do you mean the next utility?
Or just like a later on utility?
I think that's harder than it needs to be.
Okay.
Think about this. Marginal utility is the utility of each item that you consume. So you get a certain amount of utility from the first slice of pizza. You get another amount of utility from the second slice of pizza. You get another amount of utility from the third slice of pizza. Okay, each of those utilities per slice is marginal utility.
Okay.
Total utility is the cumulative amount based on what you consume. So if you got 3 units of utility from the first slice of pizza and 2 units of utility from the second slice of pizza and 1 unit of utility from the third slice of pizza, if you ate all 3, what would your total utility be? 3
Can you
plus,
repeat the number?
yeah, 3 plus 2 plus 1, right? You add up all the
Sorry,
marginal
6.
utilities to get the total utility. Okay, so if you have marginal utilities, you add them up to get the total. If you have total utilities, you subtract them. You subtract the total utility of 3 slices from the total utility of 2 slices to get the marginal utility of the third. And you do it the same way all the way down, right? So the marginal utility of the second slice is the total utility of 2 minus the total utility of 1. Okay, but the key here is step 1 is always figure out what's the marginal utility. Okay, step 2 is usually different items have different prices. And so if you're going to compare, if you're trying to figure out which item is the best one to buy, which item brings in the most utility, you need to compare on an apples to apples basis. And so if something costs more, you can't just say, well, I'm going to pick that one because it has more utility. You need to literally divide by the price. So the second step is you take marginal utility and you divide by the price. And then what you're left with is marginal utility per dollar, which you can compare. Marginal utility per dollar of pizza, marginal utility per dollar of whatever your favorite beverage is. Right? And then step 3 is you spend your money, you rank everything in terms of marginal utility per dollar, and then you spend your budget from highest to lowest until it's gone. So if the next slice of pizza has a marginal utility of 10 utils per dollar that you spend, but the next soda only has a marginal utility of 8 utils per dollar, then which should you buy? If pizza's 10 per dollar and soda's 8 per dollar,
The pizza and then the soda,
you
right?
buy the pizza and then you buy the soda, right? Okay, So it's always looking at the next one. Okay, and so if you do it in order of highest marginal utility per dollar to lowest marginal utility per dollar, when you run out of budget, you have to have maximized your utility. Okay, now there's another, I don't want to say a trick, it's not really a trick, it's a clue. A clue is a better way to think about it. If you do the problem right, when you get done with your budget, the marginal utility per dollar spent on both items should be exactly the same. Okay, if it's not the case, then either you did your math wrong or you spent your dollars wrong. Okay, think about this. Suppose you end up with your budget and the marginal utility per dollar of a soda is 2 times the marginal utility per dollar of a pizza. Okay, you look at that and you say, oh, they're not equal. That's a clue that maybe I did something wrong here. What could I do differently? Oh, that's easy. If I spent more on the item that gives me more higher marginal utility per dollar and less on the item that gives me lower marginal utility per dollar, you know, you should raise your total utility. So in this case, in the case of the example that I just told you, you should buy less pizza and more soda because you end up with higher marginal utility per dollar of soda than of pizza, right? So the only way that you can't reshuffle your budget and improve your utility is if you end up with the same marginal utility per dollar, the same bang for the buck on both things that you're trying to buy. If you do that and you've spent your budget, I mean, that is exhausted your budget, then you've got the correct answer there. Okay, now this whole process is kind of complicated. The way you figure it out is by trial and error, basically practicing it, not trial and error so much as practicing it. And so the video that I put on the course outline under utility is me walking through this process in more detail than I'm doing it right here. So if you have questions, you might want to watch that video again. All right. Any questions so far? Ashley, are you back? You checked out there for a while. I hope she's back. Okay. All right. The last thing that I wanted to do, and I'm not leaving, but the last thing I wanted to do is go over the assignment so that you're clear on how to do supply and demand problems. Because as I said, there's one just like that on the exam. So whose did I find that's really good? All right, here we go. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, and then I'm going to talk through this in a little bit more detail. Let's see. Okay. Share my screen, and we'll do this one. You know, I'm not sure why this is, but it turns out that Word document, images on Word documents don't show up very well on Zoom. This one is a PDF and it shows up just fine. Okay, so what we have is we're looking at the market for gasoline sales. And the question is, if the government imposes a carbon tax per gallon of gasoline, how's that going to affect the market here? Okay, the answer is, it's shown correctly here. The first thing that's going to happen, well, the first thing you need to understand is that it's the gas station that the government collects the tax from. So the government says, okay, how many gallons of gas did you sell? And the government and the gas station says, well, we sold Q1. And then the government says, okay, well, if it's a 25-cent tax, then you owe us 25 cents for each of those Q1 gallons. What that means is the easiest way to interpret a sales tax like this is as an increase in the cost of production. Okay, so what's going to happen here is the supply curve is going to shift up vertically by the amount of the tax. So if the tax was 25 cents, then the new supply curve would be 25 cents higher than the old supply curve. Okay, right? So we know that an increase in production cost causes a reduction in supply, which we show on the graph as a leftward shift. An upward shift or a leftward shift, it's the same thing. Okay, now as a result of that, at the original price here, we now have an excess supply, a surplus. No, that's not right. We have an excess demand, because here's the demand for gasoline at price P1, but the supply is back here, so that's a shortage. And we know that when there's a shortage, the price goes up, and so the price will rise from P1 until it reaches the new equilibrium here at P2, sorry. All right, so the way we would summarize this problem is we would say the supply curve shifts to the left or up, the equilibrium price rises, and the equilibrium quantity falls. Okay, another way to think about that is at a higher price, consumers are not willing to buy as much gasoline, so they reduce their quantity demanded. Okay, any questions about that? Lindsay, you got that? I thought you did. Okay, now the second part of the problem says, let's see if I can find it. Because the economy is slowing down, family incomes fall. And because family incomes fall, we can't afford to buy as much gasoline as we used to do. So a decrease in income is going to cause a leftward shift in the demand curve, a reduction in demand. Okay, so by the same logic as last time, the current demand is really low at the current price. So the current demand after the shift is here, the current supply is here, supply is greater than demand, that's a surplus, and the surplus causes the price to fall to its new level at P2. Okay, and the new equilibrium quantity is Q2. Right, so to summarize, a decrease in demand, a leftward shift in the demand curve, is going to cause the price to fall and the quantity to fall also. Since we're shifting the demand curve, we must be moving along the supply curve. And when we move along the supply curve, price and quantity go in the same direction at the same time. So a decrease in price corresponds to a decrease in quantity. By contrast, if we go back to the first part, we're shifting the supply curve, which means we're moving along the demand curve, which means that when the price goes one way up, the quantity demanded goes the other way down. All right. Now, in the third part, we put them all together. And this is where it gets a little complicated. Okay. What happened to demand? What happened to supply here in the first part of the problem? Did it increase or decrease?
The supply curve shifted left.
Right, so supply decreased, supply curve shifted to the left. So the equilibrium quantity went up or down?
Down.
Down.
Right, a decrease in the quantity means, a decrease in supply means a decrease in the quantity is going to be the outcome. Okay, now in the second part of the problem, what happened to demand? Did it increase or decrease?
Decrease.
It decreased. When demand falls, what happens to the quantity?
Goes down.
It goes down also. So in both cases, the quantity fell. Okay? And so we can be sure when we put the two cases together that the equilibrium quantity at the end is going to be lower than the equilibrium quantity at the beginning. We can actually see that on the graph. If we start here at our original, let's see, start here at our original equilibrium, right, S and D, and then the supply curve shifted, we went up here, which was a decrease in quantity, right, decrease in quantity, and then we let the demand curve shift and we went over to here, which is another decrease in quantity. So our final decrease is, is significant, right? So the final Q is a lot less than where we started. Does that make sense to everybody? Darlene, got that? Are you nodding? I can't tell.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, with price, it's more complicated. Okay. And the reason why is when the supply curve shifted to the left, what happened to the price? It went up. But when the demand curve decreased, the price went down. So in this case, the two effects are going against one another. Okay? So you would need to know which effect was stronger to be able to tell for sure what happens to the price. So if we don't have the numbers, which we don't here, and you wouldn't on one of my exams, then we can't tell for sure what's going to happen to the price. We can only say for sure that the quantity is going to fall, but we don't know for sure what's going to happen to the price. So the right answer is we don't know for sure. Okay? The general rule is when you have two different curves shifting, you're only going to know for sure what happens to one of the two variables. It could be price or it could be quantity. In this case, it's the quantity, but it could be the other way around. And you won't be able to tell for sure what happens to the other variable. All right, any questions about that? All right. Now, okay, I'm done with that. Let's see. All right, that's all that I wanted to talk to you guys specifically about. So what questions do you have that I can help with?
I have a question.
Yes.
All right, so I know you said that chart that we just went over and everything was going to be on the test. Will we have to do any like other charts or like any like create our own charts, or is it just going to be like all multiple choice?
No, the whole thing is multiple choice.
Okay. Okay.
But in the big supply and demand problem, what I would do is draw the graph on scratch paper and figure it out, and then use the graph to tell you what the answer is going to be.
Okay.
I have a general question on just price and quantity. Why is price on the y-axis and quantity on the x? And then the other part of that was sometimes on the quizzes and the things, they'll list price first, like price comma quantity, but I also saw them list quantity first, quantity comma price. Is there, I don't know, is there like a convention which one you're supposed to, or just
the convention is for some historic reason, economists started drawing price on the vertical and quantity on the horizontal. That doesn't make sense mathematically because it means that the x variable is on the y-axis and vice versa. So it's best to do it the way economists do it, which is price on the vertical and quantity on the horizontal axis.
when you're listing points, does it matter then? Which
No,
one
it doesn't really matter. I mean,
okay.
No.
Okay. if nobody else has any others, I don't know if you got my email about the questions on
Yes.
the Module 3 quiz.
I did. There was one question that was an error that I've already reported. That was the one about the correct format for the curves. That's kind of a dumb question. The other question, I believe the correct answer was a decrease in consumer income.
Okay.
Because what that would do is shift the demand to the left and cause the price to go up. No, sorry. Let me draw the graph myself. A decrease in demand would cause the quantity, I think it was tractors, to go down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that was the only one of the choices that would give you that decrease in quantity, I think. So I think that was the right answer. So go back and check the problem if you want, and see if it makes sense to you. And if it doesn't, just shoot me an email.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And then I have another question.
Yes.
Okay, so for when we take our test tomorrow, will the like modules like 1 through 6, what the test's gonna be on, will they disappear after we're done with the test?
The modules or the
Yes.
quizzes?
Just the modules.
No.
Okay.
No, you know,
Those
you're going to
all
need you're going to need them to study for the final, for one thing.
final test, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you
Okay,
do.
so the
You
quizzes
do
will all
need
disappear?
Huh?
Will the quizzes all be gone too as well?
They will be gone for a while. I'll bring them back for the final so that you can use them to study for the final.
Okay.
But please take the module quiz at least once before you take the exam.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
These are all good questions, by the way. And all the people that aren't here are really glad that you're asking these questions.
Yeah, because I was working on some of like the optional assignments for like practice before the
Yep.
test tomorrow. So yeah.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So this might be a little bit too much, but when we're taking the exam and if we need to visualize what's being written down for the exam, can we use scratch paper? And if so,
Sure,
do you
of
want us
course.
to take a picture?
Yeah. Yeah, no problem. No, just throw it away.
Okay.
Absolutely. Who's the farthest away from Fredericksburg?
I'm in Stafford. It's not that far. I don't know.
No, yeah, I got you beat.
I'm in
Early?
like Virginia Beach area, so like 3 hours away.
Virginia Beach? Cool.
Yeah.
I'm in Alexandria, so it's like an hour away.
I know where you are. Anybody have other questions?
Just for the grading in general, the module quizzes aren't part of our grade. That's correct?
No, the self-checks are not part of your grade. The module quizzes count a little bit each. Cumulatively they matter, but no one counts very much.
Okay.
And what percentage is the test as a grade?
15.
Okay.
So it's, it's not huge. It's just to basically give you feedback on how you're doing.
Yeah. Okay.
If we take both attempts for the quizzes and during the final we want to retake a quiz,
Yes.
is that possible?
Yeah. Let me know and I'll set that up for you.
Okay.
If that were to be done, will the questions differ the next time around you take it, or will it be the same question?
No, they're randomly selected from the test bank. So.
Oh, okay.
Ashley, did you say anything? You're muted, I think. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
muted.
Hello.
Other Ashley A.
Oh.
I can't hear you. Let's see. How about now? Try again.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My question was that you said that you don't do much math or calculations in your exams, but assuming that like for marginal utility and like total utility,
you would do.
definitely
You would have to divide those things.
Yeah, and like the percentages and stuff like that. But like besides having to do that, would that be the like main part of things that we would need to remember?
Yep.
Okay. And I remember like the wage of supply, like labor and supply, or like interest rate of savings, like those equations. Do we need to know those?
Well, they're the same thing. They're just demand and supply elasticity, but for financial stuff and for labor. So it's really the same ideas.
Like you were talking about knowing like terms and definitions, like would that fall under like knowing the equations? Would you have questions like that?
If you mean, do you need to know that a price elasticity of demand is the percent change in quantity over the percent change in price? Yes.
Yeah, like I know that, but I meant like it kind of gets just tedious when you're talking about like interest rate and like wages and then labor.
Well, it's the same thing. It's the percent change in quantity over the percent change in price.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. I was just making sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else?
Oh, it's my for my class.
No, I mean, what's happening with.
Oh, I know it's for my class right now.
Tell them you're getting more for your money, Lindsay.
Yeah, I'll tell them that.
Any other questions? Okay, because I'm getting hungry. So if you have other questions before you take the exam, just shoot me an email or give me a call or something like that, because I'm happy to talk to you. Thank you for coming, and I will see you soon.